Chapter 21 review for Government 2306 is on interest groups. And what is an interest group? What do they do? An interest group is an organized group of people with shared goals and a desire to influence government action. There's lobbying that may take place. That is the purpose. What is lobbying? To influence the outcome. So you're here, people talk on a national level about lobbyists doing this and lobbyists doing that, and they're the ones that's really creating these laws, and that is really true. So if we want anything changed, we got to become part of that process as well. Special interests have become problematic because it favors a smaller segment of society rather than the larger segment. And so a special interest group, we'll talk about what some of those are here in just a second. Interest groups are not parties. It's just a group of people. What do? They focus on parties focus more on elections. They tend to be broader in scope and who they represent. Membership is not as formal, and parties perform important functions. And so interest groups have a purpose, and that's it. It's not concerned about anything else. What is an interest group? People like to join stuff, right? So usually when you join something, you have some common interest. You share some things. You have some beliefs about some things, but you also join because you get a benefit out of it. 9 times out of 10, if I join a group, I'm getting something out of that group. Whether it's something tangible, whether it's access to something else, I am getting a benefit. And then most of the times you join something for a reason, and it's a combination of those things. So not only am I a member, I might even be a paid member. What am I getting for my membership fee? I used to always ask that question for PTA. What am I getting for my little $7? And it was just $7, but you pushed me to join. So what is my point? What is my goal for wanting to be a member of this organization? What am I getting out of it? So that's what interest groups do. They ask that question. So why did interest groups decide that they needed to develop themselves? And that was that they saw an opportunity for political participation. What do I mean by that? Mothers Against Drunk Driving is an interest group, primarily of mothers and families of people who have been killed by drunk drivers. They became very instrumental in some of our drunk driving laws that were passed, penalties that were passed on people who killed people while they were under the influence. The need for breathalyzers to be on site for police officers when they pull someone over that's suspected of drunk driving. That came out of an interest group of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So that's what interest groups do. They help formulate policy. And that's what moves the needle on a lot of things, is that they formulate policy. The NRA is an interest group. Believe it or not, the NRA is an interest group. Some people join interest groups for a host of reasons, as I stated, a benefit to them. Some is a social reason. I feel connected to something. Black Lives Matter now could potentially become an interest group with focus on police brutality, overfunding of police departments, inadequate accountability in social justice systems. Some members join groups just to make friends. They don't have anything else to do. So that's why they join those groups. There are members in the NRA that don't even own guns. Some people join because they can't say no to a peer pressure, right? Excuse me. Joining the PTA could be, you probably didn't want to join because you knew you wasn't going to have time to participate, but they kept forcing you. You was like, okay, I pay my $7. Some people need to be part of something. They want to feel like they're giving something back. They want to feel like they are participating in this process, this thing we call life. Some people join organizations that are part of their career. The National Association for Lawyers and National Association for Social Workers and the National Association for Counselors and Teachers. So sometimes you join organizations that fit to your career. People who join tend to be a little bit more wealthy because A, they can afford the membership fee, and B, they can afford the time that it takes to volunteer and participate. Whites are the largest group to join because they allegedly tend to have higher education and higher income. And so they tend to be able to participate at a greater scale. What types of groups are there? So you have single issue groups, and then you have what's known as multi-issue interest groups. And they can be divided into categories: economic interest, public interest, environmental interest, and good government groups. So you think about the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It began as a single interest group. It began as a group that was only concerned about the civil rights of Black people, period. Didn't include anybody else. Over time, it has evolved into a multi-interest group. So not only just Black people, but Hispanics, but gay people, but women. I mean, so it covers a lot now. To become a multi-interest group, the organization has to be prepared to operate on a local, state, and national level. And that's what the NAACP does. Any major city has a local NAACP chapter. Most states have a state NAACP chapter, and then on a national level. And what happens is that in that national level, then they have a national conference, and all the state people come. On a state level, they have a state conference, and all the local people come. And so that's how they get to figure out what is going to be our focus. What are we trying to have an impact on the system for this time? Single interest groups and multi-interest groups, they differ on scope. If I'm a single issue group, I'm only concerned about one thing. If I'm a group that is only concerned about immigration, I don't talk about nothing else. That's the only thing I'm concerned about is immigration, period. If I am a single issue group and I'm only concerned about health care, that is the only thing I talk about is access to adequate health care. What does that look like? How am I going to impact policy by talking about health care? A lot of what our interest groups do is they provide you guys and us with information. We get those commercials. We get flyers in the mail. They also help Congress members to get reelected. How? Because they provide fundraising and offer them money. A lot of what happens, some could say, could lean towards being in the lobbyist category, but it's not just that. And there's nothing wrong with being a lobbyist if you are creating policy that has an impact on the whole, the majority, and not the minority. Groups can also have an influence on the outcome of an election. Those PACs, political action committees. And those are an organization that raises and distributes campaign funds for elective office. We saw a lot of that during this election cycle, not only for the presidential election, but all these Senate races. Right now down in Georgia with the runoff between both of the senators down there. Actually, all four of them, because both of their seats are up. That's what people are doing. They are raising money to help one side or the other. Since the 1970s, the political action committees has increased dramatically. There are loopholes in that with those PACs, which is why there's been so much money involved in our politics. The Citizens United case that was tried in the Supreme Court that made it okay for the amount of money we see. When you talk about how much it costs for an ad to run during an election cycle, is crazy. The interest group success has a lot to do with how they have an impact on social policy and on public policy. So as I stated, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, they had a great impact on the laws and things that were put into place as it relates to drunk driving. NRA has had a great impact on what it means and what the Second Amendment really is all about. They also have an impact on gun laws across the country. So not only do we not have a national ban on certain assault rifles and things of that nature, one that we used to have, we no longer have it anymore because of the lobbying of the NRA and the power that they tend to wield over our elected officials, even in times of high probability that we would make a change, such as adding a background check. After the Sandy Hook shootings, 90% of Americans wanted something to happen and make some changes to our gun law policy, and nothing happened because the money and the lobbyists of the NRA made sure it didn't happen, because they paid our politicians through way of their PACs to keep them in office so that nothing would happen. And what they also do eventually, as the NRA had done up until, this past year, they've been weakened a little bit, but it gives them access. So your interest groups, because now you will go up on Capitol Hill and you might testify about something. Whether it's Black Lives Matter wanting to have policing reform, whether it's wanting to have the Voting Rights Act restored, whether it's Mothers Against Drunk Driving, whether it's some group for gay, lesbian equality, that may go and testify in front of Congress. Those are what our interest groups do. They have an issue, whether it's one issue, a single issue, or multi-issue, and then they go and have an impact on public policy, how things are viewed, how things are implemented, what rules and laws need to be changed in order for this to be what it needs to be. So that is the purpose of an interest group. They do have a lot of power. And now with social media, it's everywhere. And so it just kind of depends on how you feel about them. I don't mind interest groups as long as we're thinking about the whole and not a piece. And that's where I think I differ a little bit in terms of the functionality of an interest group. I need it to really be considering of all and not just the least, and not just the smallest part of the society, not in the bad way. And so when we talk about gun control, there's so many layers to gun control that we can't even have a conversation about it because people get overly emotional about it, right? Same thing with healthcare. People get overly emotional when you talk about providing healthcare for 30 million people that don't have it, not recognizing that if we allow those people to get health care, regardless of what it's costing you now, it won't cost you that much for forever. And so those are the kinds of conversations that we have to have, and interest groups can play a part in that. So that concludes chapter 21 on interest groups and what they have to offer us over time.